So, thank you very much on behalf of BHA. Welcome to all of you, and here's Bobby.
Thank you all for coming. I'm just humble. This is great. I can't even see the end of the rows back there. So many people today. It's wonderful. It's a great story. This railroading in this community has been around for a long time. My normal pattern in the past has just been to show a slide, talk about it, show a slide, talk about it, and so forth. And this year I said, Bob, you're going to try something different. The public may or may not like it, but I said, probably once I'm going to sneak it by them and see where we go with it. So what I've done today is I've asked Track McCreary to come in and sing a couple songs for us. And the first one he's going to sing is I've been working on a railroad, and he'd like you to join in with it a little bit. And during this whole presentation today, I'm going to bring in some guest speakers who will be reading the words of some of Bayfield's greatest writers and journalists over the past 100 years. So with that in mind, I would like Track to take off and have a good time with you guys. So, and join him in, join him whenever he does, whatever he does, you join right in.
There's a few pages out there, but it's an easy song. If you haven't heard it, you'll pick it up. Usually I say good news that beverages of alcoholic nature, and if you don't like the way I sound, you can drink that more. But other than that, it's one of those old ones. I work on the railroad all day long day. I work on the railroad, just pass the time away. And hear the whistle blowing, rise us early in the morn. And hear the country shouting, I will blow your horn. I won't slow, I won't slow, I won't blow your horn. I won't slow, I won't slow, I won't blow your horn. Someone's in the kitchen with time out. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with time out. Strumming our little banjo. V5, fiddly-I-O. V5, fiddly-I-O. V5, fiddly-I-O. Strumming our little banjo.
That hopefully got the blood rolling a little bit. We're going to keep it moving here. And it's going to be hard to run up that kid. He's got a tremendous voice. Well, anyway, typical road gang right around this whole area. You see the jack and you see the pick. Let me make sure I hit this right. The picking on the thing there, and there's the shovel and the railroad jack. We've got one of those at Rocky Island getting shovelers. They're out there too. But this is the old, kind of like the old railroad grade as she went through town. Again, this is sponsored by a great little organization, the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy. We are a nonprofit organization destined to share the rich history of this wonderful area, the Bayfield Peninsula and region. So that's us. That's our logo. Sometimes we think we got to work on that bad boy a little bit, but that's what it's all about now. We come from commercial fishing peoples, and probably that's where I'm best at. I'm a little bit uncomfortable today because this isn't my real strength, but it is what it is. So that's our great organization. I've got some goals today. I really want to, I got in this business of snooping around in all these old Bayfield presses years ago, and I documented a lot of stuff. My first intentions were commercial fishing. Then I got into this farming and timberland type of thing. And then all of a sudden I said, you know, there's one area that was really, really, really important in Bayfield, and that was the railroad industry that hunkered in here from about 1883 until about 1980. And so I said, Bob, you got to get out there and you got to explain it to the people. It was a way of life that you'll never see here again. And so I said, I'm going to do this, and I'm doing it now. Maybe I'll do one more this summer. But anyway, you're going to get an overview today of the Chicago, St. Paul, and Minneapolis and Omaha Railroad. They call it the Omaha. You're going to get an overview of the Bayfield transfer by William Dalrymple, who way back when decided there could be a lot of money railroading up in this area. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bayfield Harbor and Great Western, but that was a railroad that kind of just came a little bit after the transfer left town. So I'm not going to get into that too much. You're going to get a chance to meet some wonderful, interesting people on this little trip. And I'm going to take you for a little trip along the Omaha. She was being built from 1892 to 1893 into Bayfield. The old Bayfield presses did a really wonderful job of documenting week by week by week by week where that railroad was and who was there and arguments they got into, and there were some deaths and all those type of things in that whole process. So those are my goals today. Meet some people, do a little run on the railroad itself, work on the railroad itself a little bit, and introduce you to some of the old people that were so inherently, they needed this railroad so bad it was unbelievable in Bayfield. So there was a real human side of this whole organization up here. And I just mentioned that the people that played such a huge role in promoting it and telling the people are listed up here. One was Curry Bell, and I'm going to have Bill Bussey today just read a couple short excerpts of what Curry Bell had to say. I want you guys to feel like you are in that period of time, and as he's relating his messages to you. The other person, John Klugnitz, is going to do a little bit of Sam Fifield. Sam Fifield was here when the old scows went by for the old Wisconsin Central. Not our topic today, but I thought I'd throw that in a little bit because the Central was the first railroad in this area, and by this bay came a scow with two locomotives on it, and they were named the Bayfield and they were named the Ashland, and they were dumped off at Vaughn's dock. And Sam Vaughn had left here just in the spring of 1870 and 71. He went over there and built that Vaughn's dock, Vaughan Avenue type of thing. So they were there, and they started that railroad inland towards the Pinocchio Hills, and then the mother company, the Wisconsin Central, was coming up from the south. And they met in 1877 in Butternut, that area, and they had a big shindig. But that's something I might do I'll tell that shindig when I get over to Ashland one of these days. Maurice Edwards is going to be read by Track McCreary. And today we had a really special lady. Her name was Marietta Church Labonte DeMars, and fortunately for us, her great-granddaughter, Marty Peterson, is here to just tell you a little bit what it's like when that railroad hit Bayfield. No trip would be complete without somebody telling you what it was like to ride in the old scoot from Bayfield to Ashland and give you a summary of that. So Don Albrecht is graciously going to fill you in with that piece of information. And then when I get to the transfer, I'm going to keep it real short on that end, and Jerry Phillips will read the writings of Bert Hill. Bert Hill was a Sand Islander, and he was also the editor of the Bayfield Press at one time, and a writer there. So that's kind of where I'm going today, okay? There's a human side, there's the physical side, there's a real side to it. My informational sources, I need to verify them now. This isn't guessing by golly. It was thanks a million to the Bayfield Heritage Association downstairs, where there's a ton of the old Bayfield presses that give you the day-by-day account, word for word, verbatim. I use them. Anything I talk about today will come from there, and the book that I've written is all transcribed out of there. BHA photos, I was lucky to work with Bill Gover here, and then I got really lucky, and I see Bob Poofall here too. He sent me, I could never ever find a picture of the Ashland Junction depot, and I gave Bob, an old friend of mine, a call, and he said, I got one of them, boys. So you're going to be able to see what it was like at the Ashland Junction. I don't even know what year that was. Maybe Bob will fill me in a little bit later. There's a wonderful author out there, Stan Mailer. He wrote the book on the Omaha Road. And from him I learned so much about railroads. I mean, I come into this thing hardly known the difference between a locomotive and a caboose. I'm not kidding you. And this booklet gives you all the railroad locomotives, their names, their numbers, what year, where it was sold, the history of the whole Wisconsin Central, the whole Western Wisconsin Railway as it merged into the Omaha and that type of thing. Roger Grant was a writer and author. He was with the Minnesota Historical Society. Again, the Bayfield Press, the Bayfield County Press, the Bayfield Progress, they're all here. And my old buddy right here, which I rely on, is the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. There's a lot of stuff to be said there, okay? There she is. Old number 3, 73. She was in the 440 class. The way it worked was from the American Revolution and on, the United States government has had a propensity to want to make sure that all the lands in this country wound up in somebody's hands to utilize them. So the congressmen, the presidents, and senators, and all those guys began transferring much of this undeveloped land to the greater America. And at one point in time, there was more like 1 billion acres of landscapes that could be utilized. So, and they were highly desirable properties. They held on them timber, they held on these properties, minerals, they accessed the fisheries and everything that came with what a railroad could haul, and they're developed to transfer this stuff. Wisconsin became a state on May 29, 1848. By 1856, many laws, land grants were passed around the nation. So some of those acts were the Land Act of 1796, the Preemption Act of 1841, the Homestead Act of 1872, the General Mineral Law of 1872, the Desert Lands and Timberstones Act of the 1870s. So the Omaha Railway had about 2 decades really to get all these little things together. The Omaha was originally a part of the Chicago Northwestern line. When these land grants came into place in 1856, the first grant was allowed to the Chicago Northwestern people and affiliates of them. And so what happened there was they said, all right, if you guys spend our money wisely, we would like you to build a little road north of here, and that went up to Kewanee. Okay, and then that being done, they said, okay, we want you to head west now. There's a lot of stuff all west we want to get our hands on. So from there, they went from the Milwaukee area over to the Eau Claire, Elroy area, and into Hudson, Wisconsin, North Line. That is a typical railroad locomotive, and the Pullmans that they had behind them. And I think my dad, you even rode in some of those bad boys, didn't you?
I think so.
Yeah. So it was officially the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railway. In 1880, the Chicago Northwestern, the Wisconsin Western, and became amalgamated, and they became the Chicago, St. Paul, and Minneapolis Railway Company, and they consolidated with the North Wisconsin Railway Company to form the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railway. This railway line ran from Hudson, Wisconsin, a little township out of there, to Spooner, and that was completed in 1879. From 1879 to 1880, they brought the track all the way to Cable, and Cable became the railroad center at that point in time, with 500 to 700 workers using it as their headquarters. In 1882, the Chicago and Northwestern Railway gained complete control of all those lines, and so they were the mother company of the Omaha Railway system. Omaha Road was her nickname. The Omaha, at one time, she had 6 divisions, and Bayfield was included and became the terminal depot up north here. At this point in time, I wanted to take a second here and bring Bill Bussey up to read what Curry G. Bell had to say. He was the author of and the owner and the person that that held title to the Bayfield County Press, and he had a lot to say, and I want you guys to get a feel for the need of that railroad here in Bayfield. So Bill, if you come up and just take over that little position right there.
Good afternoon, everyone. A little known fact, most of you are probably not aware of, but the apparel for the male members of the Rittenhouse Singers was demonstrated was actually patterned after the clothing that Curry Bell wore on special occasions. So I just happen to have exactly the right clothing to wear today. I'm happy to do that. This is an excerpt from a piece in the Bayfield County Press that I wrote on July 1st, 1904. It begins with a quote from an earlier edition of the paper. "The long looked for has come to pass, and Bayfield this week turns one of the most important pages in her history." Close quote. There are those among us who remember well the first train that arrived in the city over the Omaha Road. At that time, it was thought that nothing would keep the town back, and a boom was anticipated. But fortunately, we were spared from such a disaster, and the growth of the little city by the lake was steady and without halt until today, when we are the proud possessors of one of the most beautiful and thriving little cities on the shore of the lake. Many drawbacks have fallen across the progressive path, but we have met them face to face, and our reward has been one of which we may feel justly proud. The hopes entertained with this railroad connection with the outside world were badly shattered when it was found that Bayfield would not be the terminus of a spur line to stem from that main road. It had been expected that through trains from St. Paul and Minneapolis would first arrive at Bayfield and then circle the bay to Ashland. But a great amount of land was opened up along this road, and towns leaped forth as if by magic. Settlers flocked in, and agricultural improvements networked the great passageway in a surprisingly short time. Thus, we have a brief statement of Bayfield's first railroad and the first move towards opening up the new Wisconsin.
He spoke very well for all the people and the residents of this whole area. From that time and on, Bayfield began to move, and she was moved a lot by old number 73 here. Number 73, I just got, when you start to do these things, I got looking around the internet and I see 73, Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha. And then I said, is that the same 73 that's right there? And it certainly was. And so then I even got into it a little bit more with, Jan Miller gave me this book to read on the Omaha, and I found out that it was. And from there on, we find out that she was built by Burnham Perry Williams and Company in 1883. That picture in Bayfield was probably taken 1915, 1920, that first one, but this is what she was. And this was the E-class, E3 class American type locomotive. She had 69 drivers in total. And I'm a novice there, and Bob, you tell me what a driver is for sure, but I'm sure it's the wheelbase in the back here.
The wheel height.
The wheel height. Yeah, okay, well, that's great. And it generated a modest 140 pounds per square inch of boiler pressure to deliver to its 18 by 24 inch cylinders. So the cylinders are
Forward and lower.
right,
Forward. Down a little bit. There.
right there's the cylinders. Okay. I'm doing good now that you guys are helping me out. She weighed a total of about 87,500 pounds, and it produced a modest tractive effort of 1,411 pounds. That's old number 73. So then I got thinking to myself, what is a 440? You know, there's a 640 and a 240, and there's all kinds of O's and 4s and all kinds of things like that within in that particular train series, and then I went on Wikipedia and I found out, oh, 4-4-0 wheel configuration is such. See, is noted by 4 leading wheels on 2 axles, okay? Usually in a leading bogie, so now we all know that this has got to be bogie up here with the cylinders, right? 4 powered and coupled driving wheels on 2 axles and no trailing wheels. So this is the tender behind it, where they had all the coal and wood and whatever they had in that guy. And come to find out that this type of locomotive was just about everywhere in North America. There were different companies that did build them, but they were operated in the first half of the 19th century. So that was the type of railroad that just laid way to all the woodlands of Wisconsin and wherever she went. So that's the 440. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Western Wisconsin. This is kind of interesting. I went to the Wisconsin Historical Society and I actually had to buy that photo. But the Western Wisconsin was the predecessor to the Omaha. And remember they merged, and this is what they had to say about her there. At the State Historical Society said the employees of the Western Wisconsin Railway stand in the line in front of engine number 12. From left are E.S. Graves. There was a guy he was the auditor's office clerk. And then there was, as we move along here, A.H. Baldwin, who's the vice president. There's A.C. Peck, Harry Baldwin. David Humbird is a big name in the railroading business in the state of Wisconsin. He was one of the, there's a place down south called Humbird, Wisconsin. It's not there anymore, but they named towns after these guys. William James was the auditor. George H. Daniels was the roadmaster. John James and W.H.S. Wright was the chief bookkeeper. And D.A. Baldwin on the right here was the president of the company. So that's kind of, I want to just back up a little bit and just let you know that every place on this earth has a start, and that's one of them right there, okay? Now, what was the route? Remember I said I had the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica? Well, the route, really, I'm going to start on the top end up here. As you can see Bayfield. That arrival date was in 1883, and then we went through Washburn, Ashland, and then down to Grandview, Drummond, Cable, Hayward. Here's where he split at Trigo. This is another route that went to Superior at that point in time. So they split at Trigo in 1882. They were in Cable in 1882, so in 1880 they were here at Trigo. Took them a couple more years to get up above. And then they went south, down to here in St. Croix County, and here's Hudson. And the name of the community that they started in was called Frontline, Wisconsin. It was a little township, and that's where it was, and that's where it crossed over the St. Croix and into the state of Minnesota, which they also had another route, okay? So you'll see that's the route of the Omaha. Prior to that, though, she did go this way and down, but I didn't put that in, and then, they went into Chicago. Thank you, Bob and Carol Kufal family, for that photo. I wanted to begin the next part of this journey. Before I get to that, though, I was going to ask John Plumness to come up here and speak on behalf of the importance, another important factor as it related to the development of this town. And John, if you would come up and read your part from Mr. Byfield.
Anyway, I'm Sam Byfield, and I'm an editor of the Bayfield Press. And I'm reading from an editorial that was published on December 30th, 1872. And these are just a few facts that he says. We hope the St. Paul, Stillwater, and Taylor's Falls Railroad Company and the Northern Wisconsin Railroad Company, will bear this fact in mind before determining their final lake terminus. Bayfield has unquestionably the best harbor on Lake Superior. and of sufficient dimensions to accommodate the entire commerce of the lake, deep enough to admit the largest size vessels, with good anchorage, protected from storms by 22 lovely islands, where no appropriations from the government will be needed, and a savings of 80 miles of dangerous lake navigation between Bayfield Harbor and Superior City. For instance, a train leaving Bayfield for St. Paul would make the run faster than by going by steamer to Superior City first and then to St. Paul by train, and this providing that the wind from the lake was a fair wind, otherwise the steamer could become delayed. Another fact that should be considered is that Bayfield Harbor is open to navigation 3 to 6 weeks longer than Superior during the season. We think the above facts should be sufficient to warrant the location of the lake terminus of these roads at Bayfield. And as our county has not given bonds to any railroad company, she will be in a better condition to give them than our neighbors in Douglas County. Thank you.
That was our friend, Mr. Byfield, and like you say, you heard Bill tell you a little bit about, prior to that, they recognized how important it was, but there was a beginning to that too, and there was a lot of work on the end of Bayfielders to bring that stuff in, and Byfield was one of the boys that had something to say about it. And then the next period of time, Track is going to tell you one more little story, and it's written by an editor of the press at that point in time. His name is Maurice Edwards. This is all about the importance and the significance of a railroad coming to this little area up here, which basically was icebound and the only way out of here was by stagecoach and sleigh before then, so.
An editorial by the business manager Maurice Edwards called "The New Railway to Bayfield." Are we to get a railroad? The legislature has finally passed an act exempting the lands of St. Croix Land Grant, lying in Ashland and Bayfield counties, from taxation for 5 years. After they shall be acquired by a company that will build the road, providing 20 miles, that on this end is constructed within 2 years. Without this exemption, it would have been entirely fruitless to have made any efforts to obtain the necessary capital to build the road. And it does not necessarily follow, nor is it by any means certain, if the inducements offered by the exemption that such capital can be had. Yet it greatly encourages efforts to be put forward for it. This exemption has not been obtained without outlay of money and loss of time, and much excellent management by those who have been instrumental in getting the legislation. There was great opposition and disinclination to allow such a measure to become a law. It arose in consequence of the very great unpopularity of exempting property from its proportionate burdens of carrying on the government. This opposition was overcome in this case by patient, diligent, discreet management. The measure itself commended itself, it is true, by its peculiar and exceptional merits. These could not have overcome the unpopularity of such legislation, nor save the act from going under the feet without the valuable services which have been referred to. And we take pleasure in calling attention to the fact that the people of this county are indebted to Bayfield's Isaac H. Wing, Esquire, who for 6 weeks has given his time, money, and patience in securing the legislation. He went to Madison, inaugurated the movement, and has been constantly in attendance upon the measure. For the last 6 weeks, which is likely to play such an important part in the future of this section of the state, and especially Bayfield County. It is also to be observed that the Honorable Samuel S. Byfield has rendered valuable services in this matter, and has been Mr. Wing's faithful and efficient lieutenant. In addition to his efforts in getting this exemption bill passed, Mr. Wing has labored to get capital enlisted in the enterprise, and we have some reason to hope that these efforts will not have been wholly unsuccessful. Whilst a sufficient amount of money has not yet been found, we hope that a good portion is thought to be available for future efforts and will result in complete success. It must not be thought or believed from this that there is no probability that the money can be had. It is such a thing barely possible, and in the present deranged condition of the finances, the widespread alarm that has seized the capitalist, it would be a wonder if the money is obtained, but we hope for the best.
Well, I wanted to stick that piece of information in there because everything that that ever seems to happen on this earth that takes movers and shakers. Isaac Wing from the Wing House in Bayfield, Bell, Sam Vaughn, Sam Fifield, all these guys were movers and shakers. But it also takes a progressive county government to back them, and that's what happened in those days. They finally rallied all the troops, and they got together and they went down and they got the foundation and the footings going for that railroad coming to Bayfield. So thank you all for your submissions here, and I'm appreciative of that. So, as I stated, everything was up to the cable area by 1882. Roads built, all the track laid, engines brought along, 500 to 700 men ready to go to build this track all the way to Bayfield. And so, I won't burden you with anything prior to that, but I really want to get going a little bit on what happened on December 16th, 1882. Well, there was a little spot outside of Ashland where Darwin Ford, I believe it is now, and where the old agricultural center used to be. That used to be the hub of the North. That was called Ashland Junction. And from that point in place came all railroads. They'd meet there, they'd transfer people there, they would, the Northern Pacific wound up there, the Chicago-St. Paul, there was Iron River Railway, there was the Wisconsin Central shop over there at times, that type of thing. So on December 16th, 1882, and I don't know how far back this photo goes, but that's the depot at Ashland Junction, and thanks again, Bob. Where I first picked up information on this was in the paper of December 16th, 1882. He said, the Bayfield Press said, confirmed that the piling work at Bonus Creek is about completed. Now, Bonus Creek is between Ashland and Washburn on the curve there. And he said, Frost has the light work on Dolby's contract south of Van Vander Bay. Anybody know where Van Vander Bay is? It is Washburn. It's as you come into Washburn, Wisconsin. That was Peter Van Vander held that tract of land about from First Land Grant, so he was one of those guys that were there. So they were pushing work rapidly up to there. Then they went on to say the track layers expect to reach Ashland by New Year's. So they had two movements going. They were coming north, and they also wanted the Omaha to get into Ashland. That's the track line, and that is from Bayfield Heritage Association, and you'll notice that's the route that they chose. This is the Northern Division right-of-way track map of the Omaha Railroad. And that's the route that they went, but they were into Ashland. They were on their way to Ashland. Barlow cut on section 31, I know exactly where that was. That has so long delayed track lane is completed, and the work of lane track resumed on Friday this week. Rossiter and Brown were the contractors. They were out of that St. Croix Falls area, I believe. They have men that work on the line between this place and Houghton Point and are doing considerable grading between Bayfield and Pikes Bay. So there you have the track line going into Ashland, and there's where they wound up, right there. That's the Ashland Depot, Ashland, Wisconsin. They got this one from the Wisconsin Historical Society. If you want one yourself, just tag the number on there and order it. But this is Ashland's Depot where the Omaha first arrived into Ashland. You'll notice that there's, 4 bays there? And I can't get the name on that, but that's Ashland, Wisconsin. I want to make mention that on December 23rd, they wrote up what happened on December 16th, 1881. This is a big deal. These are big, powerful people that own these companies. And it said in that press, he said, at a meeting of the board of directors of the Omaha Railway held this afternoon, Henry Porter, he must have gotten in trouble with them. They were going bankrupt, and he resigned his presidency. So he said he resigned, and Marvin Hewitt, he was then the president of this organization, he gained control, and he was the elected successor. Major changes were on the board were made. And guess who come on? It was people like this: William H. Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Augustus Shell, M.L. Sykes, H. Trumbull, Albert Keith, John C. Spooner, Wisconsin. Roswell P. Flower, who was the ex-governor of the state of New York, was on this board. This is how big they were. And finally, another guy by the name of Philetus Sawyer of Sawyer County, and W.D. Washburn of Washburn County. So, and the city of Washburn. So there you are. Those are the power players on that board. So there is no little Minuteman organization. A little trip along the line. Any questions about that? I mean, you can just see that there was big money tied up in railroading in those days. And lots of money was offered forth by the federal government to get at these lands and get the timber and the mineral rights and everything else that came with it off of there. So again, from the right-of-way from the junction over to Bonos Creek kind of shows here. You can see where it actually went underneath the bridge system they have there and along by Stephenson's farm and then all the way over to Barksdale. Along the backwoods there, along the lake and into Barksdale. And this is 1917 I believe, but this shows you where, the DuPont, E.I. DuPont and Moores was there, and it shows that side track that cuts into there, and it shows another track going deeper into the woods. So the Omaha would ride all the way along from there back over to the junction, come along Stephenson's, back of the Ondossigan School, and up to the waterfront up this way, and then across about where the concrete company is up in that area there. They cut across there and across the road along the lakefront, and then over to Bonos Creek, and then up to E.I. DuPont and Morse, and on their way to Washburn. On January 13th of 1883, Engineer Lang was at Houghton Point, and he said this will be cleared by the middle of February. So by the time they left in January, by the middle of February, they already had the land cleared up to Houghton Point. And the work of grading at Austrian's clearing, Pikes Bay and other points in the line goes on bravely. Austrian's clearing is right in Bayfield. As you come into town, on the south side, right about where the marina is, that whole area there, there was a ball diamond there in the old days, and the guys had it vacated because the railroad was coming through. 1883, they had a baseball team in Bayfield. Engineer, on the 17th, he said, Engineer Carrington informs us the work of driving piles for the building of the railroad bridges across the Sioux River has been inaugurated. I'm going to get into some photos in a minute, but anyway, you can see that now they're moving Barksdale to Washburn. Here's that little 1917, this is the way Washburn was laid out, but at that point in time, they had already gotten up to Carolyn Sneed's place up here at Houghton Point, and they made the curve and they're heading towards Sioux River. On March 24th, the big shots come to town. They say President Hewitt expressed himself as being highly pleased with the appearance of Bayfield. He said he was here with the Chief Engineer Johnson, General Superintendent Whitman, and the Superintendent of Construction, Jacob Humbert. And they were in town and they looked things over and they came to town, they stayed, probably had a few drinks and met a few people and schmoozed with all the locals and told them what a good deal. You can see all the politics going on, pats on the back, that type of thing. And in the same press release, they said they made mention that they'd already just gotten past the Sioux River piling bridge. At that point in time, on March 24th of 1883, that bridge was laid out, and it said in the paper it was 3,000 feet long. It required 800 pilings. It required 220,000 feet of timber and about 5 tons of bolts for its construction. We get into Washburn. We're now from Bonos Creek, we're going into Washburn. And one of the great things that the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha did was they built those huge ore docks and grain docks in Washburn. And it was for the purpose of transporting grain out of there too. So down they went, and you can see these boats lined up. Bill, you've been down there many times in your life, but This was the original coal docks, and they were, I think, gone by about 1923. But anyway, here you see the old-time steamers down there, and that is Washburn, Wisconsin. Part of the reason, in this booklet, if you're a Washburn, I'd highly recommend you pick it up, because they do a nice job in there of telling you about the lumber mills that were in town. I'm not going to get into them too much right now, but those lumber mills was a huge business in Washburn. 3 huge lumber mills, and they were boom town all the way. A great, great experience there. So that's, I think, the Tompkins one. So remember I was telling you a little while ago that they're building that track into Ashland? So by July 14th of 1883, they said the first train over the Omaha road to Ashland arrived in Ashland. So it took them a while, and by that period of time in the summer of July 14th, then the train was actually moving into Ashland and transporting people from there. And Bayfield's route is still being built, so the people in Bayfield are still bound to this territory here, okay? They also went on to say, John Ullman, a Swede laborer on the railroad, left Bayfield on foot Thursday afternoon to return to his work several miles south of the village. About 3 miles in, attempting to cross a railroad bridge on the stringers, he slipped and fell a distance of 18 feet, striking on his head, killing him instantly. So there was some people paid the price for this move. I had to purchase this one too, but this is the Wisconsin Central, and I'm going back to the Sioux River area, but this is how they got across those wetlands. They would, and this would be typical of how they built those pilings. They drive those pilings to the pile driver, and they must have run the cars off the side, and you can see the pile driver here. The train, they build out so far, I imagine they switch this thing around, maybe they're going this way, I don't know which way they're going, but they back up and drive, they lay track, and before you know it, they're 3,000 feet across there, and it didn't take them a heck of a long time to do it. So they had really good men, and they moved quickly. So that's down around Owen, Withee, Wisconsin, but it could be, you could just imagine that being at Pikes Creek, you could imagine that being at Sioux River, you could imagine that being around Grandview, anywhere along that line, that's how they had to do it. They got up towards the Bayfield area. Coming into town, there's one photo there of it coming into town. This is the old track as it came past Bob Lind and family live out in that area of town, but this is what we call the Devil's Cove right here. And so by 1883, they were up to this point, and then they went across that piece of property all along the waterfront road there, and there's the old trestle that they built across and into Bayfield. You can see the completely different world there now. But there she crossed the trestle, and now she's going to wind her way up and around into Bayfield. What you see right here is part of that old track, and that's where the old coal dock used to be down there. They had a small little spur track that would go into town too. So around she'd come and into town she'd go. So this is the coal dock area. It's a Gil Larson photo, and it's probably taken maybe in the 30s. It's a little bit later in time. Remember I was talking about the track that was the spur out to the coal dock? There's not too many photos of that old dock that remain anymore. But it's down on this beach, and this is where my dad and all the kids used to swim when they were kids. On the bottom right over, and here's the Robert Emmett. It's on the bottom yet. A lot of people don't know that, but she's on the bottom. But there you can see the Pullmans coming behind the trestle up there and into Bayfield. Isn't that a wonderful photo? And she'd sweep around here, come right around this way down into town. Into Bayfield. That's what Bayfield looked like in 1911. In she'd come, again, right here. You see this little shuttle line right here? That would go up and pick up the coal. And there's the line into town, which that track is still there. It's now called the Brownstone Trail. This is Wilson Avenue. And I believe this is one of the old Van Vanners lived in this space, the Van Vanner family. And you don't see the town square, then there isn't a nice little curve coming into town. Down around Maggie's, we're getting into there. This particular building right here is H.J. Watson's horse barn. And people live in these places right here. This is Fant Avenue, or Many Penny Avenue as we know it now. Here's where the switches are. You can see, I don't know exact terminology, maybe somebody would tell me what those are exactly. But that's where she came to town. And to wound up at the Bayfield Depot, which is down 2 blocks from here. So they came to town that route. And when they got there, I was going to ask Track at this point in time, because I know that I'm getting long-winded, to sing a little song here. It's kind of like the Cannonball, Bayfield Cannonball, a little version of that. So if you know what, it'd be kind of fun, and then I'm going to move quickly along with a couple other things and take a little break, and then I'm going to get into the Bayfield transfer. Yeah. Do you want me to pass the tools around? Okay.
We had a few, but
Yeah, I didn't know how many people would be here, but it's kind of a, I love this song when Johnny Cash sang it. Anybody know Johnny Cash in this crowd? When he sang the Wabash Cannonball, it was the Wabash Cannonball. So I asked, yeah, I asked, because of the next person I'm going to introduce here, I thought it'd be kind of fun to put a little different twist to it.
great apologies to Johnny Cash, and White Accent, I think, who wrote the original one. From the majestic St. Croix River to the Bayfield Harbor shore, she salutes the flowery meadow over the hills and by the shore. Old cemetery playing all handsome, she's known darn well by all. She's a regular combination, we all lock and call. Listen to the jingle, the roll and the roll, as she glides along the woodland, over the hills and by the shore. You'll hear the engine, hear the lonesome folks call, traveling through the jungle of your hope and roll. Well, she came down Macklin Junction, one cold December day. As she told them to the station, you can hear the people say, coming out of town, she's long and tall, and come down from Ashland, on your old Lockton wall. Well, listen to the jingle, the rumble and the roar, as she glides along the woodland, over the hills and by the shore. Hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome folks call, traveling through the jungle, on the Wabash Cannonball. Here's the American now, their name forever stand. Will always be remembered to the archives round the land. Her victory races the war and the curtains round her fall. We'll carry her name this day, we come on Cannonball. Well, listen to the jingle, the rumble and the roar, as she glides along the woodland, over the hills and by the shore. Hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome folks call, traveling south to the woodlands of your Omaha Cannonball.
Jerry mentioned to you that I'm an amateur historian, and now I really am, but I would like to introduce you to Bayfield's major historian. This is a dear friend of the family. Her name is Ellen, right? And she scripted Bayfield's past and put it into a book called The History of Bayfield, which was published. But in one of her dissertations, she had the rare chance to sit down and talk with May Labonte de Mars. And so she captured it. This is on October, from the October 13th, 1870, but this was published on May 1st, 1958. At that time, Marietta May DeMars was 90 years old on that next Saturday, and her parents came to Bayfield prior to that 102 years before that. I was lucky enough to find this nice photo of her as a young lady, and her father, Nazar Levante, who built Runke's restaurant and lodge over there. And so anyway, they're sitting down together, and Eleanor writes down some of the things that Marietta had to say. And today, I want to present to you the great-granddaughter of Miss Lamont, and let her tell you a little bit about what went on that day when the Omaha arrived in Bayfield and they drove the final spike.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, this is, by the way, Marietta DeMars was the daughter of Nazar and Matilda Levante, and Matilda, by the way, was the latter in her own right, the daughter of Mrs. and Mrs. John B. Bono, who came to Bayfield in 1856. You're hearing about Bono Creek earlier. If you ask yourself if there's any correlation, yes, there is. So, going back to that day, this is written by Eleanor Knight on May 1st, 1958 for the Bayfield County Press. And she talks about on the morning of that day, October 12th, 1883, Conductor Hickey's construction train was at the Austrians' clearing. And this is a clearing on the Bayfield side of George W. Dunkel's farm, right south of Bayfield here. We were seeing a photo of it earlier. But even from that distance, he promised to have the track laid in and his train at the depot ere the setting of the sun. Naturally, Bayfields were excited over this railroad, which would connect our town to the outer world. All day long, the workmen were surrounded by anxious throng of men, women, and children who were wrought up to a high pitch of anticipation. They followed the men along the curve of the bay as they worked, noting each tie that was laid and each rail that was fastened into place. As the day wore on, the trainmen and the track layers seemed to imbibe a portion of this Bayfield spirit and redoubled their efforts to reach their goal. And they made it. The last railroad tie went in, the last railroad spike to it, and then, after a suitable dramatic pause, the train started down the tracks to Bayfield. It came slowly, making the proud moment last, and as the hands of the clock pointed to the hour of 4:04 p.m., the train halted in front of our depot. Then the Bayfielders really let go. The Star-Spangled Banner was flung to the breeze. The old brass cannon, which came forth on all important occasions, boomed away with bursts of smoke and flame. The whistles on the steam vessels in the harbor began to blow, uniting with the blast of the locomotive whistle. The bells of the churches and schools were rung in one prolonged salute and echoed and re-echoed from hilltop to hilltop. But even that wasn't enough noise to greet this new train. The throats of the excited throng pealed cheer after cheer. That was a big day of impromptu celebrations, and it was followed by a big night of more celebrations. At last, Bayfield had a train. At last, the day of the long, cold winter walks and rides to Ashland were over. And the Bayfield Press reported this effect of the train upon Bayfield. Bayfield falls into line and adopts the new standard time. Pike's Mill, which had so long regulated time in this burg, has been forced to throw up the job and now toots according to railroad time. The school bell joined the chorus, and all things are lovely and fair to look upon. Mrs. DeMars remembers that for years, people met the train every night. They came in at 11 o'clock, and the platform was always crowded with train meters. A stranger arriving would look down from the steps to a large circle of delighted, interested Bayfield faces. It might be disconcerting to the shy, but a hearty welcome to behold. People were overjoyed to have this train replace the old stage, which After 1878, he would run to Bayfield every day during the winter. 4 horses pulled a big sleigh filled with straw, where the passengers huddled for protection from the cold. And now this is way before the book Across the Bay ever started. It went down the road to Holden Point and then onto the ice across to Ashland. It was easier in the summer when the trip, of course, was made by boat. The old Ava Wadsworth ran a regular schedule. Knowing this, we can understand how wonderful it was for people to have a train that ran regardless of season or weather.
Thanks, Marty. It wasn't all as cool as everybody thought, though. Bayfield was a wonderful community, and people flocked to here, and it reached the peak of about 2,400 people in about 1924. And one of the people that came here came from Norway, and it was my grandmother. And she came in 1899, but she had a different interpretation as to how lovely Bayfield was at that time. You gotta remember in Nigerson, Norway, there were cobblestone streets and everything was painted and nice and beautiful. And she came over here to be with her family, and she took the train and wound up in Bayfield in the spring of that year. So when she got off the train, and as her daughters relayed to her and to Julian, they said, "Ma, boy, you sure have it good in America here." You know, and then her mother was saying, "You should have been there when I got off the train." She said, "I looked up and down the streets and there was nothing but mud streets and cattle and all, everywhere you looked." And she said she could just cry and almost want to go back to Norway. So I picture her here, so out of reverence to her. But also to let you know that probably on a train like this, old number 74 is what she got off of. And I'm pretty sure she looked right here and saw the First and Last Chance Saloon. And anything else that was up and down the street and went, my. Okay? I'm going to kind of throw the ball into a little different direction here, just a quick one. I've got Don Elbert here to tell you a little bit about it. I thought it would be really important for you to know what it was like to take a ride in the old Scoot. Now, the Scoot was the daily that went to Ashland 4 times a day. And there was a nice writing about it written by Chick Sheridan quite a few years ago, and we're just fortunate today to have Don Elbert come in and tell you what it was like to ride in the Scoot right here. Okay, this is the Scoot. She was a dealer.
Well, I can't match the tall sycamore in uniform today, but I do have Chick Sheridan's camera with me, so I thought that was the person I'm reading for today. Bravely belching clouds of smoke and steam while creating a fearful and wondrous racket, the old Ashland, Washburn, Bayfield Scoot revives fond memories of the railroad era of the Chequamegon Bay region. From the opening of the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railway's line in Bayfield in the fall of 1883, this stretch of track between Bayfield and the Ashland Junction site dominated the transportation scene between the two cities for almost half a century. The Scoot made 4 round trips a day between Bayfield and Ashland for many years. Coming through Washburn on its first trip at around 8:30 a.m., there was a second trip in late morning, returning in the early afternoon. The afternoon train made connections at Ashland Junction with the train from Ashland to the Twin Cities and went through Washburn about 2:30 p.m. And the fourth trip went through Washburn around 6 p.m. and returned at 10:30 p.m., reaching Bayfield at about 11. In spring, summer, and fall, the Scoot had competition from the Ashland-Washburn ferry boats, the Mary Scott and the L&D. But in winter, the railroad was the only comfortable transportation between the Chequamegon Bay communities before the advent of improved highways, snow removal, and heated automobiles. There are so many older residents who have fond memories of the Scoot. The red plush cushions and the varnished woodwork, the smoky lamps that provided minimal illumination, the steam whistle that echoed along the shore of the bay faded away far inland among the hills and valleys. The dry, dusty, and distinctive smell of coaches compounded of coal smoke and steam, kerosene in the lamps, and dust from the red plush. The steady click of the wheels passing over the rail joints, the slow progress of the conductor as he passed along the aisle, punching tickets, the swift but swaying passage of the brakeman as he hurried along the aisle in the performance of his tasks. the majestic beam of the engineer, idol of all youngsters, as he gravely waved and saluted from his throne at the throttle. Memories of Christmas Eve at the railroad station are especially vivid. The scoot was always an hour or so late, as it had to wait at Ash Junction for the train from the Twin Cities. The waiting rooms at the station would be packed to the door, with abundant body heat supplementing the smoky heat of soft coal from the stove in the center of each room. Under the hum of conversation was the constant click-click of the telegraph, and occasionally a bulletin of the progress of the Twin City train would be passed around. At long last, a distant whistle would penetrate the waiting rooms. There would be jubilant shouts of, "There she comes!" And out on the station platform would pour the eager waiting crowd, filling the platform to the edge. Everyone would peer along the track to the southwest, awaiting the whistle and the first sight of the locomotive's headlight beam. Then the train would thunder in, bell ringing, steam hissing, brakes squealing, with the miracle being that no one was pushed onto the tracks. And finally, the passengers would slowly emerge from the cars and down the steps, their arms full of Christmas gifts, the air full of shouts of welcome. Those were nights to remember.
So, Bayfield Depot and the scoot. Long may she live.
I have a question. Did it have its own engine that took it back and forth all those trips? You know what?
Maybe there was 4 or 5 different scoots with different numbers on them, but they call the beeline back and forth the scoot run,
It
so.
was different than the Omaha engines that would haul stuff back and forth between.
It might have been a lighter scale, locomotive. I'm not sure, Bill,
Okay.
but it was part of that line, so. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys a little bit about what Bayfield's rail yards looked like in those days when the people were coming to town. These are the Pullmans that were there. Not only did the Omaha pull the Pullmans, but they also pulled the fish car for the Bayfield hatchery, and they dropped this car off all over the state loaded with fish. There you can see the inside of her. That's a DNR photo right there, and this is the Badger, they called her, and she's in front of the Bayfield hatchery, and you can see where the line went there. So that was their fish car, and they loaded her full of ice and water and all the fish all over the state of Wisconsin. There she is leaving town. And the last depot is still standing. At this point in time, this is down right around Houghton Point, and this is going to be a significant move to rehabilitate this little depot. It's the last standing depot that I know of around that belongs to the Omaha line, and there's going to be a movement to reestablish that and get that fixed up one of these days. At this point in time, Bill, would you I believe this is where you come in now, and I'm thinking I look at my notes to make sure I'm right where I need to be. Yeah, if you'd come in and just say your little piece here, and then we'll move on. This is called the incalculable importance, so it kind of is a little wrap on the importance, and it's again done by Bill.
We're going to move back to the day that the railroad first came to Bayfield. This is from the Bayfield County Press, Saturday, October 13th, 1883. Ere this issue of the press is read by our subscribers residing outside the harbor city, the first regular passenger train will have rolled into this village, which for 27 long years has waited so patiently for the arrival of the iron horse, the last blow of the hammer having fallen upon the golden spike signaled the completion of this great enterprise inaugurated so long ago. The importance of this event to northern Wisconsin and the Great West, as well as this immediate locality, is incalculable. It forms a grand highway from the rich plains of the far west to this inland seaport, for which their products may find rapid and cheap transit to the markets of the east. It opens up and renders available to settlement a grand territory of valuable timberlands and gives outlet to the great pineries of the northwestern part of the state, thus pioneering the way for the capitalist and the laborer to the rich fields for their enterprise and skill. It renders available for maritime business one of the grandest harbors in the world, and its coming is hailed with rejoicing by the storm-tossed mariner, as well as by those who heralded its coming by settling upon its shores long years ago. Friday, October 12, 1883, will forever remain a memorable date to the citizens of the harbor city, that being the date of the completion of this iron pathway to the outer world.
With that in mind, I would like to just take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back, and I've got about 20 to 25 minutes, which is going to be dedicated to another one of the institutional railroads here, the Bayfield Transfer. That went out into Robert Alverson's old turf up that way in the town of Russell. So let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, and we'll put a little wrap to it, and we'll have some coffee and donuts and things after that. Okay? Take 5. The next portion of this little hour and a half, hour 45-minute session is dedicated to William F. Dalrymple and the Bayfield Transfer Railway. Dalrymple's dream. Everybody has a dream. William F. Dalrymple had one too. He was a gentleman who came to Bayfield with the idea that this would be one of the great ports in the Midwest. His idea was that he was going to transfer his brother's wheat from the Bonanza farms out in North Dakota to Bayfield, Wisconsin, to ports around the world. Oliver Dalrymple was his brother, and there's a Dalrymple now that is the governor of the state of North Dakota. So it kind of runs along those lines. He envisioned Bayfield as a booming port for grain and forest products, and his railroad would make it possible. Dalrymple owned all the waterfront property between Bayfield, Royce Point, and Red Cliff. This project lay dormant until 1896 when 2 miles of right-of-way were graded. 4 miles of track from Bayfield north to Red Cliff were laid on the following year. The first train ran on this line on April 25th, 1898. There were some other trains in the area, and I'm not going to go through them all, but the Bayfield Transfer basically started July 26, 1883, and ran through January 1st, 1916, and then it was owned by Henry Wasp Lumber Company. And they ran it until about 1924. So as you can see, there are just all kinds of little railroads coming in and out of this area. Into Washburn, not into Bayfield, but Washburn, Ashland. Little spurs going here and there. And these are the years that they were in process of delivering timber. The Bayfield Western Railway is a real interesting story within itself, but I won't get to that today. Anyway, at this point in time, there was nobody in Bayfield that wrote any better than Curry Bill except one person, and that was the person who he employed as an editor and a scribe for the Bayfield County Press, and that was a gentleman by the name of Burt Hill, Burton P. Hill, Sand Islander, but he was also the editor of the press for a period of time until he got lead poisoning and went fishing. But anyway, Jerry Phillips is here to read a very nice story about what Mr. Hill had to say about the Bayfield Transfer. So if he doesn't have it right, I don't have it right. So thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Bob. This was written for Saturday paper, September 3rd, 1898, entitled William F. Dalrymple's Work. In 1873, soon after the failure of J. Cook, W. F. Dalrymple, one of the brothers whose great wheat farm in Dakota is known all over the world, purchased from the assignees of Cook 700 acres of land lying above the present Bayfield on the Bay Shore. This land was purchased by Cook several years prior, he having in view the great possibilities of the harbor. Mr. Dalrymple purchased the land, believing even more strongly than Cook did in the harbor advantages of the place. For nearly 25 years, Dalrymple had been a voice crying in the wilderness, pointing out the tremendous gain to lake commerce which the harbor of Bayfield offered, if the trunk line railway could only be induced to build to the shores of that place. In the meantime, Dalrymple had gone on purchasing land until he now owns the entire shoreline from Bayfield northward over 7 miles, his holdings comprising something over 1,200 acres. He has not had the means himself to build railways connecting the lakefront with the trunk lines, but has lived in the hope that the trunk line companies would see it to their advantage to come to him and the Bayfield Transfer Railway. This hope was long deferred, but now seems near to realization. With the years has come some means, and Mr. Dalrymple has already graded and built his shoreline extending from Bayfield, where it connects with the Omaha Railway, north along the shore through the Red Cliff Indian Reservation on over 6 miles of road. West of this, he has started his grading for a branch 25 miles in length, which is to connect the Duluth, South Shore, and Atlantic Railway and the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, 3 trunk lines. He will secure at once good income from the shoreline, which he has built, independent of any harbor advantages, though being the only railway entering the Red Cliff Indian Reservation, upon which there is now standing about 100 million feet of pine that the government has ordered to be cut and marketed. This lumber during the next 2 or 3 years, Dalrymple's short line will deliver to the Omaha Railway at Bayfield. By 1898, Mr. Dalrymple will lay his 20 miles of track southwest from a point about 5½ miles above Bayfield. By careful surveys, he has found that he can reach the trunk lines spoken of with a grade of not above 26 feet to the mile. Plans for a great harbor. When these conditions are made, it would seem that the project for immediate development of the harbor property would be excellent. There is deep water enough facing the shore property of Dalrymple's and around the hills that is protected to float all navies of the world, together with a good part of the merchant marine of the world. None dollars worth of dredging would have to be done in this harbor. There seems to be a rocky bottom throughout the entire bay, and 100 feet, or the length of a small vessel out from the shore of any of these islands, and depth of at least 25 feet can be found, so that with a minimum expense of building docks of heaviest vessels now in the lakes and oceans vessels can be run into Bayfield Harbor. Mr. Dalrymple has given a great deal of time to the investigation and study of the harbor and transportation question, and one cannot hear him talk long about his enterprise without being impressed with his store of information and by his prophetic faith. Dalrymple is a wonderfully interesting character. He has a face such as artists like to paint, full of strength in his contour, with an eye like an eagle's. He is in rather poor health at the present time, but never for a moment loses faith or interest in his great project. Possibly he may not live to see the fruition of his hopes, but he proposes to do all he can to promote the green enterprise and will trust to posterity to do the rest. On his 1,200 acres of land, Mr. Dalrymple has platted a small city. The streets are laid out, some of them cut through and graded. One of the avenues is over 5 miles in length. The outline are those of the coming city, overlooking this beautiful bay and the numerous islands. Whatever one may think of Dalrymple's enterprise, he cannot but respect and admire the energy and faith of this earnest man who is putting all his earthly possessions into it not as a real estate speculation to bring him in immediate returns, but as a great commercial enterprise which is a benefit to the country. It is a man of his character and his prophetic faith to whom this country owes its greatness.
Well, it's pretty easy to see that there was a lot of enthusiasm in this community, and there were a lot of great writers. And I enjoyed each and every one of those dissertations. Bert Hill mentioned in there that, you know, there was a chance that Mr. Delmer may not live too long. Well, the fact of the matter was he died in 1901. He's buried out in Pittsfield, Pennsylvania. It mentions his obituary, which is in the book that's out there, so it gives a really nice story about his demise at the end. But anyway, he was around till 1901, and his family kind of operated that railroad, you know, as it was, that type of thing. And then finally, about 1916, I think they sold all their interest in it to Henry Wasmuth, who was the head of Wasmuth Mills in Bayfield. So anyways, you can see Jerry really laid it out that Dalrymple did have a dream. And he put his money where his mouth was. He was all over the nation trying to secure funds from people. He was into he was into Milwaukee, he was into on the East Coast, trying to gather money all the time. And he had big interest in Milwaukee too, but those were his two primary areas. And he wanted to build this set of docks. And this is his blueprint map that his company put together, which would show the general outlay from Bayfield here, right around where the ferry boat landing is, all the way to Roy's Point, where the marina is. There's a lumber mill here. There's a big lumber mill here in Redcliffe at this period of time. There's a couple in Bayfield. Anyway, that's one of the lines that went into the, I know Robert Halverson's here, and he lives out in the town of Tunerville, which, or used to live out there, and they used to call the town of Russell Tunerville, and so the name of that railroad out there was a Tunerville Trolley. And that's kind of what that organization looked like, but there's some of the white pine and timber that they were gathering out there to be moved along that line. Here's the railroad time cards. This is just to prove to you that there really was a Bayfield transfer. This is out of the Bayfield Press. And it says here the Bayfield transfer left Bayfield at 6:40 a.m., 1:20, 4:15, 5:40. They arrived in Redcliffe 6:55. They left Redcliffe and arrived in Bayfield. When whoever was on that train got off down here at the depot, switched cars, off they went over to Ashland on the scoot. And when they got into Ashland, they stopped there and get on a train into Ashland on the other Omaha or the Central, or from there they go to Duluth, Superior, or the World. So anyway, and this is the time card of the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha right here. So you can see that they would connect. This is May 18th, 1902. The route there, I've blown this up a little bit, as you can see. It never did make his 22 miles, and it never did make it to Iron River. He died in between, the interest is gone. There was a number of other little spurs that came out of the Washburn area. But you can see where the Omaha is coming up, and then Bayfield stops right here, and the transfer went to Redcliffe, and a couple miles south of there, it went off into the town of Russell and out as far as Racket Creek. It was originally intended to go this way and around this way, and finally wind up over in Iron River here with the Iron River line. But that never ever came to be. But the wood was logged off those hillsides by other railroads, of which I showed you that list of them there, and it's too complicated to even begin to talk about that, how that all worked. But it was really an interesting period of time. So that was there. They'd come back to Bayfield. This is the transfer down at the Walksmith Mill at the front of the lake, and you can always tell the Walksmith Mill because she's got that high stack. And here's the mill pond where the hack noise lays now. All the logs would get dumped into there, and then there's a trolley that went up right in this area here. Well, there you can see the transfer. She's got loads of logs, and you can actually see them splashing into Lake Superior there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gondolas, whatever they called them in those days, and they're dumping them into that position of town. As you can see, the transfer, I wanted this photo in there because it kind of shows you that the transfer ran along the shoreline here. It went along Front Street in Bayfield and came out across the lake. A lot of people don't know that, but it came across the lake and went over to Penny or Fant Ave in those days and was on this side of it. And then she wound up over here to the Bayfield Depot is over right in this area here. Here's the roundhouse.
You know the date of that photo?
This is about 1906. This is a Burt Hill photo right here. 1906, this photo is. There she is. I think you guys thought I was kidding you, but this isn't the best of photos, but these are really, really rare photos of that operation, to be honest with you. We're just lucky we have them here. But anyway, you can see the Pullman here. Probably they had a load of baseball players that were going to play a game at Red Cliff, or they're going to play a game at Royce Point, or they were going to take that team and go to Washington, the Sawdust City they call them, and the Ashland Doogies and the Spooner Rails and all that stuff. All those kids went on there and did everybody to go shopping in Ashland and those type of things. There's a shot of the tracks as it came from Bayfield on this side. This is the east dock down there. On September 5th, 1908, they lost the whole lumber yard out there on that point. Huge fire. Well, anyway, that's significant in this photo, but this is also significant because it shows you the rail tracks where the old transfer went north. South and north, we're now heading towards Red Cliff. Anybody recognize that girl? That little girl was there, and that's on Front Street. So you can see the tracks of the Bayfield transfer as she slid through the woodlands and through the shores. There's a nice advertisement. I know this is about it's got to be about 1911 because it says shop at Nelson's store. Well, Nelson's store in those days was where Bates Bar is. So they had a beautiful, beautiful store there, and I'm sure that's the first, the sign information in town maybe or something like that. Shop at Nelson's store. They're coming from Edmonton. From there, you'll notice that the old pagoda was actually over here, but here's where the transfer come along the shoreline, and here's the transfer depot where you get your tickets and you go north up to Red Cliff along this track line, which ran behind Booth Fisheries here. Booth Fishery, this is the Booth dock right now. This is the north dock in Bayfield. That's all underwater. Yeah, you used to swim off that when you were a kid, didn't you?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so and there you can see some of the old fish tugs and the Mackinaws in Bayfield. I figured this photo was either 1899, 1900, somewhere in there, so I just slopped up 1900 for your information. But anyway, she ran along the shoreline. And this is what one of the Toonerville trolleys looked like out there in the town of Toonerville, or now the town of Russell. The town of Russell came to be in 1913, so it was technically the town of Bayfield when Dalrymple and that group ran that route out there. Russell set itself off from Bayfield, so did Bayview in 1913. So they incorporated in their own townships. Back to where we're at, this is kind of a fun photo here. You can see right here Booth Fisheries, the north dock, the south dock. This is what it looked like. This is all beach now. Can you believe that, folks? You walk down there now, it's all beach. Here's the railroad line that'll come out, north track, right to Red Cliff. We're heading north along this line now. There's the Pullman right there. There's my dad's favorite tavern when he was a kid. He used to walk by that, the Bucket of Blood was the name of it. When my dad used to haul the sandwiches down to his father there, and he often said he walked on the other side of the street because there was a fight going on every time. So that's the Bucket of Blood, the train ran right by there, north. Again, another nice little shot of the Tunerville trolley, probably maybe a Shea locomotive. I'm not real sure what that is. Bob, maybe you know a Shea from the other one, but I'm pretty sure that's a Shea locomotive there. She ran past Booth Fisheries. Isn't that a wonderful shot of Booth down there in the old days? Here's the waterfront. This is all gone. The North Dock's all gone. Clifford Haslam probably swam off that too. I don't know. You old enough for that? He said no. Anyway, there's the Booth Dock, Booth Fisheries, more Booth Fisheries. There's one of the first gas boats in Bayfield. So that would indicate to me it's after 1906. That show. There's the railroad locomotive shack that was located just as you're leaving town. You never know it by looking at that piece of property now that anything was ever there. It's nothing but jungle and a waterway along there. So that's going north out of town to Red Cliff, just leaving Bayfield now. The two tracks merge, then they wind up being a single line. This is about 1899. This is a Bird Hill photo. Thank you, Bird Hill, for taking these because we have no record of it. But that's the line going north. There's, I believe, the Hill Children as they were sitting on those rocks in those days. And as you can see right here, the Bayfield transfer is following all the way along that shoreline. Past the hoppers out here someplace, past all the people that live in that territory, up to Royce Point. And I'm thinking I don't know if that's Royce Point yet. I think that's the point before Royce. And then it's swept around the other way. So that's the old line there. There's another shot of her. None of that riprap is along the shoreline anymore. But if you go by there in your boat, you'll see all those rocks in Lake Superior yet. So they shored her up. It was a great expense for those guys to put that type of rail line in to that point. Bass Island, you can see Bass Island's logged off there on the south end. As they got into Royce Point, that was where the lumber mill was. That was the the William Knight lumber mill at Royce Point. They would stop by there and pick up materials from out of there. There was also another factory there called the Kurtz Downey factory that burned in 1911, and they made shingles and boxes out of that place. So there was quite a load to pick up there. And then this is another shot of that area at a different period of time. But what's interesting about this is the railroad went by here to pick up stuff at Royce Point, but it also shows Red Cliff in the background. And this is a really, really rare photo. I've never seen this one before until Bill Gover stumbled upon it. He says, "Where's this?" And I said, "Well, that's Red Cliff in the background." And there's that big mill, that lumber mill that was at Royce Point, which is now that big marina that you're seeing there.
Wow.
Red Cliff, Wisconsin. They had a lumber mill. It's the only photo I've ever seen of the Red Cliff mill. And that's just on this side, on the lake side of the casino, right where the boat ramp is there. That's where that's sat. They also had this St. Anthony's Catholic Church. They had a boarding house run by a Mr. Buffalo. And Paul Mithke had a post office in there. There's the mill tower, the stack in the back. So you can see the post office and the general store, and also the mail was delivered to that point in Red Cliff.
Was there any indication of who owned that mill?
Sure, that's another story within itself. Yeah, he was the story of the mills in Red Cliff, and I won't get into that now. It goes back to about 1863 when Nazir Levant said that was one of his first jobs. He worked there. There was a mill there. Then there was one the government put in the 1880s and 90s. So there's kind of different transitions going on. So that's Red Cliff, Wisconsin. The only photo I've ever seen that showed that mill in Red Cliff. Again, look at the tower, smokestack. Oh, there's a picture of Robert Halverson. That's another one of the little trains. I'm kind of mixing up train photos in here, but these are what those old trains look like. That one out there, that's old number 2, and that can be accounted for in that book of yours on the Omaha. As you're coming back to Bayfield, standing on the hillside there, That's the way the track looked along the shoreline way back when, 1906.
That house is gone.
This house is gone, this house is still there, that's Howard Hale's place. That was built by Howard Hale and that's where Ellie Present lives at this point in time, so. And he was a railroad man for the transfer, he was the point person for William Dalrymple. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up right now, I'm running a little bit over. I wanna thank you all for coming today. Any questions you may have, I'll try and answer the best of my ability. There being no further questions, and all business of this board being over, I want to thank you all for